Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark.
What Waits in the Shadows, Volume 2, Story Number 1. I've had a series of shadow experiences since I was a kid. For many years, I never came across anyone who had seen a shadow figure until about a year ago. A customer at the video store I used to work at started to tell me about a few shadow experiences he'd had. He didn't call them shadow people, but just shadows, when he was a kid. And that got me thinking about my past with the one I saw over the course of my youth. I'm now 21 and attend a college in Texas. When I was about 4 years old, I had a room on the second floor of my house. One morning, I woke up and turned my head to the window and saw a shadow of a man wearing a hat. Now I can identify it as a Stetson type hat, riding a horseless wagon. He passed by my window quickly as if he was just on a ride and disappeared on the other side. I didn't even move until my mom came in the room soon after to wake me up for breakfast. That experience was quite weird, because I know if I saw something like that happen now, I would freak. We moved out of that house a few years later and moved into another neighborhood a few miles away. One of the things that was on my mind was that shadow. I didn't want him to come back. When we moved into that house, I would dream about the shadow coming to my window in the middle of the night and banging on my window, laughing. Before he would come, I would hear horse hooves in the distance, which signaled his approach, and I would hide on the side of my bed as he would come and start banging on the window, laughing. Unlike my 4-year-old experience, I began to fear him now. These dreams became frequent nightmares, and the hot water heater, which was in the attic near my room, made noises, which didn't help the matter. One day, my mom was babysitting my neighbor's daughter, and I was home too. My mother kept us busy by playing Go Fish with us. During the game, my mom said she heard a noise, and we all stopped, concentrating on the game, and listened. It was a banging sound coming from upstairs. The funny thing about that instance was, my mother just said it was nothing and continued to play the game. My mom is not like that. If she heard something nowadays, she would investigate it. My neighbor's daughter didn't seem concerned about the noise either, but I was. After a few minutes, the banging went away, and I was relieved. Later that year, I started to tell my parents about the shadow I saw and the dreams that I was experiencing, but they didn't take much notice to it, and my brothers didn't either. To them, I was a kid just making up stories. After that, I never talked to them about it, still to this day. After second grade was over, I was still having these dreams of that shadow man and his wagon. I was scared of going upstairs by myself because I thought he was going to be at one of the windows, especially my window. I was outside playing in the backyard, and I don't know exactly what I was doing because it was a long time ago, and I looked up at my window from where I was standing and saw it shake. It banged 3 times. I ran to my dad, who was in the garage for safety. I didn't know what to do. The most bizarre experience I had with a shadow was when I was sick one day. I believe I was in the 3rd grade. Sorry, this experience, I can only think of as in what grade I was in when it happened, and I had the flu. It was bedtime, and my mom told me to wait in bed while she went and got my medicine from downstairs. When she left, I was just laying there and heard those hooves coming from a distance. I jumped out of bed and ran into the hall, taking refuge from my room next to my door. The hooves stopped, and I heard 3 bangs come from my window. I called for my brothers, but they didn't hear me or the bangs, and their rooms were down the hall. At that moment, I saw my mom coming up the stairs from the banister, and she asked what I was doing out of my room. I peeked in my room and saw that the shadow was not there. I had a hard time sleeping that night. Gradually, the dreams went away. We moved overseas after the 3rd grade, and I have never had any more dreams of the shadow, but on one occasion when we moved back to the United States, I have also never had any more experiences with a Shadowman either. I am very thankful for that too. I've told my friends about these experiences, but I know inside they're laughing. It's a hard story to tell because it is odd. Usually you hear people talk about seeing ghosts, but I have never seen a ghost. But I have seen a shadow at my window. I know the story may sound weird, but it happened. Story number 2. I have had an experience with a shadow person. It took place about 5 years ago, right after my youngest daughter was born. My husband works nights and he had just returned to work after being off to help with a baby. My daughter and I were sleeping in the living room. She was in her bassinet and I was in the recliner. I woke up to my feet being pushed and shaken. When I opened my eyes, I could see a man standing at my feet, shaking me awake and calling my name. Of course, just waking up, my eyes were trying to focus and I only saw a dark figure standing there. He said, "Door, wake up. It's me. Nick, Door, the baby is crying. Wake up." I replied with an okay, and didn't make a move to get up. I didn't hear her crying. Again, he shook my feet and said in a more stern and kind of a strict voice, "Door, wake up. The baby is crying. Do you want to get up and take care of her, or should I take care of her?" The way he said that last part, "should I take care of her," scared me. There was something in his voice that to me sounded threatening. It struck me hard, because my husband has never said or acted threatening about anything with the kids. I then told him I would get up and take care of her. I closed my eyes briefly and opened them very quickly. I now heard the baby crying. I was very nervous about the threatening tone in his voice, so I got up quickly and picked up my daughter. Being we were sleeping in the living room, I walked down the hall to ask my husband to just hold her so I could get her bottle and run to the bathroom. When I got to my room, my bed was empty. I thought this was rather strange, since he just woke me up. So I checked the bathroom, empty. I checked the other kid's room and the basement. He wasn't there either. By this time, I'm getting very freaked out and confused. I walked out to the living room, looked out the front window and noticed our car was not there. I then looked at the door. It was securely locked. Then I looked at the clock. It read a little after 1 a.m. Right then and there, I knew it could not have been my husband. He doesn't get home until 6 a.m. I finally managed to pull myself together and calm down. I, of course, took care of my daughter, and she soon fell back to sleep. Needless to say, I stayed awake the rest of the night until my husband did come home. That was my one and only experience with a shadow person. I do sense a male presence in the house, but I don't know who he could be. Every now and then I catch a glimpse of something or someone out of the corner of my eye. I sometimes feel like I'm being watched, yet no one is there. Maybe my shadow person was just watching over us that night. Perhaps because I was in such a deep sleep, he woke me up so I could take care of my daughter. The threatening tone in his voice could have been nothing more than a strict tone to really wake me up and go to my child. He could very well be a guardian angel. Guess I will never know for certain. I feel a bit more comfortable with this experience after time has gone by, but I hope never to have another experience like that again. Story number 3. Now, the first experience I remember with shadow people was around the age of 7 or 8. Though yesterday night, when I brought up the topic with my mom, she told me that I had seen them at an even younger age than that. The shadows that I see seem to be one person, a very vulgar looking person, in a basic male design, but completely jet black. The only difference between my story and the ones that I've heard from other people is that this shadow always seems to walk towards me in a fast pace every time he appears. Luckily for me, I've been sleeping during the day and staying up all night, all through this summer break. My experiences at younger ages, when I lived in my old house at the age of 7, maybe to 12, I remember I would always see him at night, and he would always come out of a door in a dim lit area like my closet or the door leading to the garage. I moved to my new house at the age of 13, and since then the experiences have grown and the shadows have become more vulgar and frighten me more. Now, With all the times I've seen him, I've never slept at night since the age of 7 without some kind of lighting in the room, because if I'm in a dark room, then I know that they come. It's strangely similar to the 2002 horror movie They. Now, on this particular night, I wasn't expecting to see anything because I had moved from my old house and figured that whatever was there would stay. But no, I have a habit of continuously opening my eyes to look around the room before I fall asleep. I guess it's just being paranoid, but sure enough, I opened my eyes and there was the shadow, standing in front of the foot of my bed, blocking my door and pointing his arm at me. I was shocked and tried to yell because I had never had such a close experience with them, but when I tried to yell, I couldn't produce any sound. So I just stayed there trying to talk and yell. After a while, he just faded away. I immediately grabbed the remote for the television off my nightstand and flipped on the TV to calm myself with some sound in the room. I eventually ended up sleeping in my dad's room that night on the floor. I've had about 3 or 4 experiences since then. Each one, I get scared and run to my room and flip the light on and shut the door. But this last one was really bad. It was a dream, but nonetheless, I had an encounter with the Shadowman. I was falling asleep with the TV on when I decided to walk to the kitchen to get a quick glass of water before I went to bed. As I walked toward the cabinet to get a cup, I noticed that the glass kitchen door leading outside was unlocked. I went over to lock it, and when I looked out the window, I could see the Shadowman standing right in front of me. The only thing between him and me was a 2-inch glass door. My memory isn't perfectly clear since it was a dream, but that was the first time I made eye contact with him, and he seemed to have green eyes but no face. I just stood there, making eye contact with him, and neither him or I moved. After the initial shock wore off, I started to yell and woke up scared and sweaty. The awful thing is that where he was standing is right next to this room. Also, there's a big window there, so one of these nights I'm sure that he's going to be standing there and we're going to meet again through that window. Story number 4. I was brought up in a Christian family environment. The episode in particular that I wish to share took place one night about 10 p.m. in my bedroom, which was off the living room on the front right corner of our house. I was 17 years of age and the year was 1969. I always slept on my side or stomach. For some reason that is still a mystery to me. I felt I need to sleep on my back. A bedroom door was open to the living room, and I could see light from the kitchen doorway, halfway lighting the living room wall. I was slowly going into the alpha state before sleep when 3 loud, powerful blows to the outside wall of my room boomed with a deafening sound. I was immediately frozen with sleep paralysis, fully aware of all surroundings. I tried to physically call out, but found that no sound came out of my mouth. It would not even open. The light on the living room wall was still as it was before. This was the only reassuring feeling I had, as the sleep paralysis was a new sensation for me. It seemed the more I tried to move, the more severe the paralysis became. I had a very eerie feeling of an entity in the room with me, actually just left of me, and it hoarsely whispered my name in my ear with a guttural animal resonance. I kept struggling, trying to break free of the paralysis, repeating over and over again in my mind, "Oh my God, help me. Oh my God, help me." My struggling became more and more intense with no freedom of this perilous helplessness. The sound in my ears was nothing less than a horrible groan-like, hideous train-like roar. My physical body began to lift off the bed horizontally and rose slowly towards the ceiling, all the while struggling to free myself, repeating my urgent prayer to God for help. My head seemed as if it was about to go through the ceiling when a horrible mask-like face came screaming at me. The next thing I remember was that I was as limp as a dish rag on my bed, lying on a sheet soaking wet from sweat. This has never happened again, but I have numerous sleep paralysis episodes with the terrible sounds in my ears. It doesn't matter if I sleep on my back, sides, or stomach. It happens nonetheless. And I never know if ever it will stop. Story number 5. Okay. My first sighting was when I was about 14 years old. It was quiet. I can see the closet and door from where I sleep. So I woke up around midnight, and I felt a bit chaotic. I looked at the closet, and something was behind it. It towered itself above the closet. It looked huge, like a bear. Huge shoulders and all. It literally filled the end of my room. As I followed it in awe, the person stood in front of my closet. It came near me. When it was close, I could feel something near my legs, something like a touch of a hand. It crawled itself really close to my head, like it was inspecting me or something. It wasn't quite a fear that I felt, almost as if I wasn't sure if it was evil. The truth is, otherwise I would have been terrified by now. But this was in the beginning, and it seems to do the same thing once in a while, checking out if everything is fine with me. Of course, at the start, I was scared, to be honest. I was terrified. I'd never seen anything like it, but that feeling faded away, and then I know I can sleep safe and sound without a scratch. If I want it to go away, I'm not really fit to see it. I tell them to go away, and it fades slowly. It really seems that these beings have personalities. Once I tried to make close contact with it. It stood beside me. It was a bit lower than me, and I asked for a sign. It pinched me in my right hand. It hurt a bit. I'm even thinking about giving it a name. It isn't evil, and it feels like a guardian. It also seems to stand next to my bed the whole time. It seems to take a lot of forms in my room. And let me tell you, it is really playful. It runs and flies. Maybe they don't want us to feel scared. We should explore how they act and take a different look on these things. And maybe they aren't all evil somehow. Sure, there are many of pure evil, but it can differ in every situation. But before all that, many years ago, I had another one in my room, which really scared me. When I woke up with the thing for the first time, I had a horrible dream. A few minutes after I calmed down, it was just the beginning of what was to come. Like my room went even darker somehow, and I heard a deep voice babbling some words. Get on with it. Whatever he meant by this, I really don't know. But I was so terrified. I switched my light on and screamed like never before. Was it a message? I could never figure that out. Story number 6. I still vividly remember an incident I had. I've never forgotten it. I've never understood it, but I think I'm starting to now. When I was about 4 years old, this was 1980, I was deep asleep in bed and woke up in the middle of the night. My bed faced a closet, and since it was a Cape Cod-style house, the wall area above the closet was slanted out. I looked up and saw a shadow of a very large man on the wall above the closet. It had a head and torso with large muscular arms. When I noticed it, it began to move its arms, flexing them and twisting and turning its body. I was horrified, but as I tried to call out to my parents, I found I had no voice. The Shadowman seemed to laugh, although I couldn't hear it. It made gestures as if it was laughing and pointed at me, like it was mocking me. I continuously put the sheets over my head, but it was still there when I got brave enough to look up again, and it would begin moving all over again. I eventually fell asleep that night, but for a long time after that, I could still feel its presence watching me from over the closet. I also remember being awakened several times to someone whispering in my ear and touching my hair. Whenever I tried to call out to my parents, I had no voice. This went on for some time, but eventually it stopped when I got older. I don't know why. Now, here's where the house next door comes into the picture. As a small child, an old lady lived next door to us. Her parents had built the house and left it to her and her brother when they died. Sometime in the 1960s, her brother went into their detached garage and committed suicide by drinking chlordane. It's some type of weed killer or a chemical for lawn. I can also recall playing in my backyard as a child and getting feelings of absolute terror for no reason and having to run into my house to escape these feelings. Anyway, the old lady went into a nursing home and several families lived in the house since. About 2 years ago, another neighbor was coming home very late at night from an emergency plumbing job, and as he drove by my next-door neighbor's house, he said he saw the dead brother float out of the yard and go up the driveway of another neighbor's house. This neighbor was sure it was the dead brother because he had known him when he was living and he recognized him. Curiously, the driveway the dead brother went up had been the home of one of his buddies from high school. Then, last year, the couple living next door split up, and the man got a girlfriend who spent the night with him in the house. She told him she was psychic and felt the presence of a man named Charlie who died on the property. The man had no idea about this and asked my mom about it, who confirmed the fact that Charlie had committed suicide in the garage. When my mom related this to me, it immediately clicked. Was the shadow that taunted me and watched me the dead brother, Charlie? I don't know, but it seems to make sense, and all I can think of is that it stopped when the lady entered the nursing home and other families with children moved in. Maybe he decided to watch them instead of coming next door to my house. Who knows? I'm just glad he stopped. Story number 7. I've been carrying this story around for 24 years, and it's the only encounter I've had with a shadow person, but I have had numerous encounters with spirits on and off throughout my life, starting at the age of 7. I'm sensitive to the presence of spirits in my immediate surroundings. In other words, if one is nearby, I am aware of it. I remember this as if it were yesterday. When I was about 8 years old, I was down in the basement of my parents' house with a friend of mine from the neighborhood. The basement was half finished and the other half was left unfinished, as this was my father's work area where he kept his tools and such. My friend and I were watching an old Abbott and Costello movie on the television in the finished part of the basement, what you call the rec room. There are 2 doors along the eastern wall of the rec room. One goes into the toy room, where my toys and games and such were kept, and the other door led into my father's work area. On this day, the door to my father's work area was open, and just inside this door going into the rec room is a television my friend and I were watching. I stood up from my chair, still watching the television, while backing away as I planned on going upstairs for something to drink. Standing there a few moments, still focused on the show, I heard the sound of someone walking in my father's work area, the scuffling of dress shoes against cement. Naturally, I assumed this was my father walking around the room, even though he had not been down the basement that day. I thought he must have come down without me noticing because I was watching television. Upon hearing the sound, I remember my friend jumping up quickly and coming to my side. I guess she didn't expect anyone to be in my father's work area, because up until hearing this sound, as far as we knew, we were down there alone. My parents were in other parts of the house. So there we both stood, waiting to see my father walk in through the door from his work area, and the sound grew closer. We both watched in silence when it walked past the open door to my father's work area. It was all in black, wearing what I described as a child to be a long black coat and wearing a black hat. Not a top hat or anything like that, but a hat with a brim pulled down over his face on one side, or at least where his face would have been if it hadn't been completely black. I did, however, see the coat sway as he walked along. Also, I recall his gait as he walked. It sounded as though he had a limp and was scooting his feet along the floor, not picking up his feet as a normal walking. So the sound was like a shh, pause, shh, pause, shh, and rather slow. After standing there for a few moments, until he was nearly past the open door, my friend and I ran quickly for the stairs. So quickly, in fact, we were trying to get upstairs, and we ended up pulling each other down to get up faster. Once upstairs, I slammed the door and didn't go back down the basement that day, or for literally years for any extended period of time, other than to say to retrieve something, and only when accompanied by someone. My mother, my father, my brother, my friend. My parents' basement since that day has always had a feeling to it. There are indeed things around their house. Now that I've long since moved away from home, since being married, my mother every now and again will tell me when she has seen things. There was another experience a year or so after the above mentioned that may be related to the above. Let me explain. My father and brother were not home this evening. They had gone out to someplace. Can't remember where. At home were just my mother, grandmother, and myself. The three of us were sitting in the family room watching television. My mother had gotten up to use the restroom right off the family room, when my grandmother and I continued watching the television. All along the one wall in the family room are floor-to-ceiling mirrors. On the other side of this wall is a stairwell to the basement. My mother wasn't in the bathroom very long at all, perhaps 5 minutes or less. However, while she was gone, my grandmother and I heard a very loud bang against the wall with mirrors, as if someone had punched the wall from the stairwell side of the wall. This bang was so loud and struck so hard, the mirrors on the wall vibrated. Thank God the mirrors didn't fall, as my grandmother was sitting in a chair that had its back to this wall. The sound even woke up our dog that was sound asleep and prompted her to bark twice. When my mother returned to the room, my grandmother and I must have looked terrified because my mother questioned what was wrong. My grandmother and I both asked simultaneously, "Didn't you hear it?" The loud bang, my mother never heard it, which is strange since she was only in the bathroom off the family room. It was so loud, I imagine if one were upstairs, they could have heard it, but she never did. Not knowing if there was an intruder in the basement, my mother quietly went to the basement door and latched the deadbolt. She then went upstairs and got my father's handgun in case there was indeed someone in the basement who tried to break through the door. Again, my father and brother were away that night, which made the three of us even all the more nervous now that we could possibly have an intruder in the basement. Finally, we three decided to get into the car just to get out of the house altogether. So we piled into the car. I insisted on taking my dog along, and we pulled out of our garage and sat in the street next to our driveway to wait for the return of my father and brother. After about 45 minutes or so, my father and brother returned, wondering why we were all in the car and at the end of the drive. And yes, he had a few laughs about how silly this must have seemed not only to my father and brother, but also to neighbors passing by. But we didn't care at this point. We explained the situation, and then my father and brother went into the house and down the basement. They hunted every square foot, and there was no one to be found. No sign of intrusion, nothing. Over the years and numerous conversations regarding this incident, I've always assumed that whatever it was I saw when I was 8 years old banged on the wall. And in any case, whatever it was that did wasn't pleased and was very strong. I've never heard any loud bang on a wall like that before or since. Did something want our attention? If so, why just my grandmother and me? I guess we'll just never know. Story number 8. I've never seen a shadow person before this, and it was intriguing to say the least. I was on a walk with my sister's dog, walking along an old railroad track that passes through part of a beautiful golf course. The path is mostly smooth with just remnants of the old wood railroad ties. It was a bright, sunny, and clear afternoon in October. On the path, there are 2 overpasses or bridges you have to pass under. As I approached the first one, I felt some mixture of fear and sadness, but had no idea why. I just told myself to be alert, and I did feel fairly safe because my sister's dog is a strong pit bull, and it was a beautiful day. Not until the way back, as we were walking towards the same bridge, and I was looking straight ahead when I saw a man dragging a bag or a sack. My eyes saw him clearly, but at the same instant my brain was telling me something is strange. He was solid black, no features, no colors, and super fast. He ran from the right side of the path to the left side, just underneath the bridge. I was about 20 to 30 feet away, and I saw this clearly. The reason I am so certain my eyes were not deceiving me was that I had seen 2 different people approaching me on the path, and they were at least 20 or 30 feet away. For example, the woman I saw approaching had blonde hair with a red jacket and 2 dogs with her. So the black shadow man was really just that, completely black and dragging a bag. Only he did move extremely fast. I walked fast, and it took me only a short time, 2 to 3 minutes or less, to cover the 20 to 30 feet. As I was about to pass under the bridge, and I was super alert, just in case this was an actual man, some weirdo or criminal, etc., I looked to both sides and saw such thick bushes with thorny undergrowth that it didn't seem possible for a human to quickly hide himself, unless he could climb a flat cement bridge wall in under 2 minutes. The dog sniffed the ground but seemed as perplexed as me, and we just quickly moved on. I wanted to tell everyone, of course. I'm about 40 years old, but my sisters and the others were skeptical. They just felt that it was something that could be explained like an actual person. But no actual person is ink black and just disappears into thin air. And if it was a person, there would have to be some noise. He was dragging a large bag of some kind. Anyway, I immediately checked the internet, and to my surprise and relief, found several places that discuss these black shadow beings. I have one simple theory. Maybe their souls in purgatory or in limbo, and that is possibly why I feel this feeling of sadness and fear come over me before I saw it. And they don't want to be bothered or seen, which is why they move so fast. So I say, to each his own. As long as you don't bother me, I don't bother you.